The United States defeating Japan in World War II was not a big accomplishment. It was not a difficult accomplishment. And we're going to talk a little bit about why. Often in this discussion, a lot of Americans of the more stupid variety have a lot of pride in defeating Japan in World War II, but really anyone could have predicted it just simply looking at basic economic information. There was no way that Japan could have beat the United States one-on-one. And I'm assuming, I've never listened to, what the Japanese people, or not Japanese people, but the Japanese leaders, but I'm assuming the great majority of them understood that fact. And I think Japan was definitely counting on a German victory in the European theater, which would have given Americans a lot different perception on what they're going to do. But who knows, maybe they were that delusional, but I don't think they were, or at least a significant number of them. Anyway, the size of the U.S. industry was huge, okay? And Japan, out of all the major nations, had the least developed industry. Now, it is true that Japan did catch up in aerial and naval technology. That is true. But that without an industry to replace and maintain air forces and navies is a bad situation, and that's what they were in. So basically you're looking at a situation where any losses that Japan incurred in battle could not be replaced as quickly as any losses that the U.S. suffered, because the U.S. basically pioneered, or didn't really, I wouldn't say I guess you could say pioneered at least an aspect of mass production, at least for that era. So like I say, the U.S. pretty much had the most advanced factory systems since the early 1900s. So they were much further advanced than even other countries that were generally more advanced than the United States, such as England and France and Germany. So that's a big issue. Not only that, but the United States had way more resources, and their scientific culture was just much more developed, simply from being descended from Northwestern Europe, which is something I talk about a lot because of, or I should say not genetically descended from Northwestern Europe, but technologically, culturally descended from Northwestern Europe, because Japan was isolated from technological development for many years leading up to World War II, or the years preceding World War II, which stunted their technological development. So basically the factories in Japan and everything like that were way underdeveloped compared to other major nations in the conflict, despite them having very good naval and aerial technology. Another thing, there was a treaty after World War I that limited the damage control of ships, military ships, and Japan was part of that. I'm not sure if the United States was part of that or not. I don't think they were. I know like Britain was and Japan was, but even if the United States was, Japan's going to be even at a bigger disadvantage of that, because like I say, once the ships are taken out, even whether it's Japanese ships or both Japanese and American ships, the Americans can replace or bring more at an exponentially higher rate than Japan could. So defeating Japan was not a big accomplishment. It was not a big surprise. It was a very easily expected outcome, especially considering the Japanese army, though extremely they had a disciplined culture, they didn't have the type of modern military tradition and discipline that the United States had. the United States was level on even with countries like Britain and France, and Germany were a little bit above the United States. So Japanese ground troops were also at a disadvantage from that perspective, not only in training but in being supplied. But that mattered a lot less because the war was mostly decided by sea and air. So you can just basically look at naval technology, aerial technology, and industrial capacity. And that industrial capacity is the weakest link, and usually in wars, the industrial capacity is the most important aspect of winning a war. Whether you have allies or not, you need that in industrial capacity. That's the problem. War fans are kind of dumb like that, kind of like sports fans are. They don't really look at the economics, they don't look at the mathematics, and they end up overlooking that, and they give credit to heroism and military abilities and stuff like that. But no matter what your military technology is, no matter how good your troops are at fighting, if you don't have that industrial backbone, you're in big trouble, except for in certain situations where you can pull off some kind of quick victory or something like that. And looking at the industrial numbers, if you research GDPs, or even GDPs are a good thing just to look at, and you can just see there was no chance if the United States put any effort into the war, they were going to win that against Japan. Another thing to consider is, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the Japanese had a lot of their troops tied up in China and whatnot, so there was just really no way. So even if Japan had knocked out the entire U.S. Navy in Pearl Harbor, and even if Japan had superior fighting abilities to the United States, vastly superior, the United States still would have won the war simply because of industry. It's that simple. The industrial differences were just too big.